self-esteem, workplace-related topics.
Subscribe.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision.
Voices of Victory.
Leadership.
Voices of Victory.
Workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Di Leone.
Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast show. I am your host, Mario Di Leone. Today's episode is going to be an awesome one. The two faces of narcissism. Yes, we talk about this on this channel. And I'm your host, Mario Di Leone. So welcome to another episode of Voices of Victory. I just want to start off by saying there is an over and under diagnosis problem because of social media. And I want to share that whatever I bring across, I will aim to have that information as accurate as humanly possible. So I want you to understand that you shouldn't grab on to just any idea from social media about narcissism so quickly without really going into the depths of it, because the human psyche is far more complex than what social media could actually offer. Is that people are biting into these social media posts out there and they're just overdiagnosing and underdiagnosing without really understanding the complexity of human nature. Like, we can't look at our human nature with just a snapshot 5-second judgment of a post. We have to be able to go deeper and understand that the human nature requires us to actually go deeper. So we're going to dive into the complex world of narcissism today, not through the lens of diagnostic checklists, but from the rich perspective of psychoanalysis. So narcissism in its many forms is ultimately a story. It's a story about self-esteem, a story about identity, and, of course, a struggle for validation. So in this very episode, we're going to explore the two primary faces of narcissism. The arrogant version, often referred to as the grandiose narcissist, and the depressed, depleted version, also known as hypervigilant or deflated narcissist. So we will examine the underlying dynamics that give rise to each one of these and the reason that these patterns actually exist. Let's start off with the arrogant or grandiose version at first glance. The grandiose version is a little bit different. The grandiose narcissist exudes confidence, charm, and unshakable sense of self-worth, at least at first glance. However, beneath this veneer is a fragile self-esteem, and it's deeply shielded and protected. It will protect it at any cost by a fortress of arrogance. So let's take a look at the 5 reasons for the arrogant version. The first really strong reason is a defense mechanism against shame. So at its core, the grandiosity serves as a psychological shield of defense against deeply buried feelings of inadequacy. So this version of narcissism emerges when individuals, often in early life, of course, they learn to suppress their vulnerability by projecting superiority. Now, the second point is that overcompensation. So there's an overcompensation for emotional neglect that they might have experienced. So many grandiose narcissists have childhood histories and memories of being ignored, of being undervalued. So they respond by overcompensating. This creates a persona that screams, "Look at me, I'm important, you need to see me," as a way of gaining the attention that they were denied as children. And the third key point is that it is a learned survival strategy, that some individuals grow up in environments where only successes and strengths are valued. So they may have grown up with a very harsh parental expectations, in such families showing that weakness is punished or ignored. So this grandiose self becomes a mask for survival. It's their need for survival. Now, perfectionism, I have a book on that. You can check out my book, The Beautiful Flaw. Perfectionism as a false identity. That's another key point. The grandiose narcissist will build their identity around accomplishments, around externals, around beauty, around status, around external things. So these external markers, what they do is they serve as evidence and proof that they're worthy. But they're just merely props to keep the show going, on stage, right? It's props to keep their inner security actually hidden. And that brings us over to the next one, which is dependency on admiration. There's a strong dependency to be admired. They become addicted to admiration, which acts as a temporary balm for their inner turmoil. So this relentless concept concept, the need for externals, external markers, external validations. It traps them in a cycle of arrogance to maintain the illusion, I say that strongly, illusion of superiority, not superiority itself. Now, the depressed, depleted, hypervigilant version, unlike grandiose counterparts, the hypervigilant narcissist presents themselves as withdrawn, insecure, and actually aware of their perceived shortcomings. Like they're actually aware of those things. So this version is equally preoccupied with self-esteem, but approaches it from a place of emptiness, and there's lots of feelings of shame. So the 5 reasons for the depressed, depleted version is a lot of internalized criticism. Hypervigilant narcissism often comes from environments where they were criticized and compared to others a great deal as children. And over time, they internalize these criticisms, leading to chronic self-doubt and a sense of unworthiness. Now, there's also a second key point, which is attachment trauma. Inconsistent or conditional love during the formative years. The years, we'll say, like the moment they came out of the womb to about 13, 14 years of age. Those are the formative years. This creates a void. It's an absolute empty void. So these individuals crave connection and validation, but they're unsure about how to achieve it authentically. So it leads them on this desperate hunt for external narcissistic supply. In other words, they have to get their fill out in the world from the externals around them. And the next key point in regards to them is identity fragmentation. So if you listen to the words, fragmentation is like broken up into pieces, and identity is like the core essence of who you are, who you know yourself to be. Or we could call it the I, and all of the reasons why you do things below that. So the identity fragmentation is literally without a sense of stable self. It's the hypervigilant narcissist that feels lost and disconnected. So this emptiness compels them to seek others to define their worth and create a perpetual cycle of dependency. Now, when we get to the shame-based one, the number 4, shame-based depression, see, unlike guilt, which focuses on the actions of what they did, shame is about the self. And a hypervigilant narcissist will experience a pervasive sense of being flawed or never enough. What this does, it results in depression. It's characterized by emptiness and despair. Now, when we get to fear of rejection, this very version is marked by a heightened of sensitivity to rejection. Very sensitive to rejection. And every interaction is filtered through the lens of, am I good enough? I don't know if I'm good, right? And they could have been told a lot as children, you are not worthy, you are nothing, you are trash, right? Making them hyper aware of social cues and, of course, becoming anxious all the time because they have to live up to some kind of approval. It's all about losing approval. So they have to keep up with it. They have to keep the act up. Now, the common thread is that there is a self-esteem maintenance, all right? Self-esteem maintenance means that they have to literally feed their self-esteem, and not always in a healthy way. And that's what ties these 2 faces of narcissism together, is the shared focus on self-esteem. So the grandiose narcissist, they build a fortress to protect their fragile core, while the hypervigilant narcissist, they openly seek external validation in order to fill that empty void. Both versions are rooted in unmet emotional needs. And you know what? It stems from early experiences that disrupted the formation of stable self-concept, a concept of just having a strong sense of worth, right? Sense of identity. That's what we call self-concept. There's more to it, but on the surface, that's the basics. So what I want to share with you in closing is that narcissism is misunderstood. It's been reduced to stereotypes of just selfishness and arrogance, but as we really explored today, it's a deep human struggle, a response to pain, unmet needs, and a desire to feel whole again. Now, what I want to share with you is today's approach had a completely different point of view. Today's approach was one of compassion, having compassion. Now, I'm having compassion for the narcissist because what we can understand is that it's really stemming from deeper things. And that's the difference between the concept of looking at things objectively. So what do I mean by that exactly? Let's go over it together. So why am I bringing out compassion as a component, all right? Why am I bringing out compassion as a component? Because there are literally 2 lenses or perceptions today in how narcissism is perceived. And the internet is not doing the greatest job of perpetuating that. So there's 2 perspectives. We have the DSM-5, which I've discussed before, and psychoanalysis, right? So here's where things get a little interesting. So when it comes to the psychoanalysis and DSM approach, narcissism is perceived in different ways. That's why the concept is so important for you to understand. In psychoanalysis, this explores the unconscious dynamic, the deep, early experiences when it was from their childhood that shaped who the narcissist is. So there is a level of compassion and understanding with that. And that changes the dynamic and the perception. Where the social media perspective of narcissism is that it's all evil and people just want to gather the information to create a projection about their ex, and they could have some social proof about their ex or ex-girlfriend or girlfriend or whoever they are. They want to use it, and that's why you can see my episode on weaponized narcissism, about that, weaponized narcissism. So that people have weaponized it because they want to use it to kind of peg their ex against the wall, to literally frame up their exes, frame up their partner as the narcissist, right? But psychoanalysis doesn't see it that way. We look at it in the unconscious dynamic that the childhood has shaped the way they are. So there is some compassion there. And most people will say, well, how could you have compassion? Well, if you don't have compassion in this case and you don't see it with that lens, then you see it from a judgmental lens. You're not being objective. You're seeing narcissism through the lens of your own experience. In other words, what you've been through. So that's not what we're discussing here. I'm not discussing how you view it. I'm discussing how it's viewed through psychoanalysis and the DSM-5. And the DSM provides a different point of view. Their point of view is they look at the behaviors, the observable patterns and frameworks for diagnosis and treatment. So they look at the observable patterns of behavior, the frameworks as it relates. Both perspectives are valid because what they do is they give us a rich understanding of what narcissism really is. So one is very patternistic. DSM-5 is patternistic observable behavior, and the other is dealing with the principles of that these things are buried in the unconscious mind. It's literally buried deep in their psyches. In other words, they are a function of their programming. They are a function of their childhood. It doesn't admonish what they do, okay? It's not like we exclude justice in this big package. That's not the case. The two models, we need to understand that the two models help us understand narcissism is the observable behavior and the unconscious dynamics, all right? The things that are buried in their head, in their psyche, in their childhood, what stems from their conditioning, their life script, if you will. So there is a distinction, and I have to highlight that because a lot of people are losing their compassion because there are so many social media posts out there that are projecting this 5-second snapshot judgment of their ex-girlfriend, right? Or ex-boyfriend, or whoever the case may be, right? So human behavior, I want everybody to know as an audience, human behavior is far more complex than a social media post. And I'm going to pause for the effect on that. It's far more complex. Human behavior as a whole goes far deeper. So these two frameworks, what they do is they offer different perspectives. What does it do? It drives individuals and how we make sense of their actions in different ways. Okay, one is just a pattern of behavior, one is the effect, and the other one is the cause, right? So the DSM-5 represents what psychologists call an observable behavioral model. It's outward measurable traits. What this does is it approaches and prioritizes the patterns, the behavior that can be seen, recorded, and classified as it relates to DSM-5, right? As it relates to NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. The whole point is to help clinicians just have a shared language, right? Now, when we look at a different point of view, it's like this model stops. This model stops at the surface, okay? It's observable behavior. I get it. It's accessible. It's what people see, okay? So when we look at the behavior, it's like a person that's boasting about their achievements. That might be labeled as grandiose, right? Or a lack of empathy might be inferred from the actions, like dismissing another feeling. But these behaviors are visible. They don't explain why the person acts the way they act. That's just the observing behavior model. But here comes the unconscious dynamic, all right? So psychoanalysis is the hidden force. It's underneath. And you know what? It can offer up a perspective of compassion, allowing you to deal and look with people in a different eye. It doesn't mean that you can't work with your own boundaries and maybe defending yourself or protecting your energy from them. Like, you can still do all those things, right? But you can still have compassion. There's still a level of compassion. That's the difference between judgment and compassion. Judgment and compassion, in my eyes, are opposite from one another. Totally opposite. So with psychoanalysis, the contrast is it dives into the unconscious motivations. There are deep reasons why they do what they do. And we have to start looking at people as not a label, but a bundle of unconscious motivations behind those behaviors. So some people won't see it that way because of the fact that social media perpetuates that 5-second snapshot judgment, right? But beneath all of the externals, there's a complex interplay of childhood experiences, unmet needs, a defense mechanism that exists. It helps you to deal and understand with those people. And the grandiosity might be a defense against feeling inadequate. And if you look at some social media posts, you might distort that idea and not look at it in a way that's productive or functional. A lack of empathy from them could stem from the inability to process one's own vulnerability. So yeah, this perspective has endured for over a century because it taps into the universality of the human mind and the human experience. It's less about labels and more about understanding the root cause. So one is the effect and the other one goes down to the root. That's the difference between DSM-5 and psychoanalysis. So that's all I'm going to say on this podcast. I hope you understood this. I hope you appreciate it. Most people that will argue against what I said will be operating from a lens of judgment when it comes to what I just discussed. They'll be operating more on the DSM-5 observable behavior because that's what they've experienced. Remember, it goes through the lens of what your experiences are. You don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. And all your experiences forge that lens in which you've seen people, unless, of course, you develop a sense of objectivity and neutralness to really see things as they are. And that's all there is for today. Have a great day and see you on the next episode.